Chapter 2685, Generous Remuneration, Tier 4 Promotion Quest. Chapter 2685, Generous Remuneration, Tier 4 Promotion Quest. As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, the female Cursemancer and the other Frost Heaven members inside the room promptly snapped out of their dazes. All the contempt they previously had for Zero Wing swept away. The number of peak experts Zero Wing currently had was indeed no match for the various superpowers. However, with Shifeng's mana domain, he could boost a team's combat power by a significant margin. Moreover, if a superpower did not have any means of dealing with a mana domain, it wouldn't matter how many Tier 3 experts they sent at Shifeng. Every one of them would just end up as cannon fodder. Guild Leader Black Flame, you really are a straightforward person. In that case, let me introduce myself first. I am Mushin, a Vice Guild Leader of Frost Heaven, and I am here on behalf of the guild to invite Zero Wing to join Frost Heaven's alliance, Mushin said, looking at Shifeng. Your alliance? Shifeng looked at Mushin with some confusion. As far as he remembered, Frost Heaven had always walked the path of a lone wolf, never forming alliances with others. That's right. You can consider it an alliance targeting the foe saint monsters, Mushin explained, nodding. So long as Zero Wing joins the alliance, not only will we attack and defend against the foe saint monsters together, but we will also share plenty of information with Zero Wing, especially information related to the foe saint monsters' activities. This way, if the foe saint monsters try to conduct any large-scale operations, we will be prepared for them. What are the entry requirements? Shifeng asked. For the current Zero Wing, the offer of help in attacking and defending against the foe saint monsters wasn't particularly important. However, information regarding the foe saint monsters' activities was something that interested him greatly. Although Zero Wing's members could collect plenty of information regarding the foe saint monsters' movements, the scope of that information would drastically pale in comparison to what several superpowers working together could obtain. With such information, he would have a better grasp of the foe saint monsters' movements and could have Zero Wing make preparations ahead of time. After all, the problem of the foe saint monsters wasn't something that could be dealt with in the short term. In fact, these monsters would remain a big problem for Zero Wing far into the future. Guild Leader Black Flame, you're overthinking things. There are no conditions for joining the alliance, Mushin said, a faint smile appearing on her face. If I have to give one, then it is receiving Frost Heaven's recognition. Does that mean Zero Wing has received this recognition already? Shifeng asked curiously. Of course. Moreover, aside from inviting Zero Wing into the alliance, I also wish to extend an invitation to Zero Wing to take part in a secret operation our alliance is planning, Mushin said earnestly. Secret operation? Is it compulsory to join? Shifeng asked when he noticed a hint of excitement on Mushin's face. It's not compulsory, but if Zero Wing is willing to help, I can personally provide you with a generous remuneration. For example, I can give you 50 bottles of S-rank nutrient fluid, something that the various superpowers are currently in urgent need of, Mushin said. The other Frost Heaven members standing beside Mushin turned to her in shock. Mushin, what are you thinking? That's an absolute secret. Even within the alliance, only 2 other guilds have the qualifications to take part. If you invite Zero Wing, even if the Grand Elders agree, the other 2 guilds will most likely have strong opinions about it, the female Cursemancer murmured to Mushin. The female Cursemancer wasn't particularly surprised that Mushin had agreed to Zero Wing's joining the alliance. After all, with Silverwing City's benefits and Shifeng's mana domain, Zero Wing indeed possessed the qualifications to do so. However, inviting Zero Wing to participate in the alliance's secret operation was a completely different story. The secret operation Mushin referred to was extraordinary. Frost Heaven and the 2 other superpowers involved in this operation had paid an enormous price to secure this opportunity. Mushin was simply insane to invite Zero Wing along. Relax. I'll just say that Zero Wing's participation will be taken from my share. That way, the 2 other superpowers should not have any problems, Mushin replied nonchalantly. You have truly lost your mind. You asked for this. It's your problem if Uncle Hong and the others get angry at you, the female Cursemancer said in a huff. As the heiress of the Boulder Corporation, one of the 3 main corporations supporting Frost Heaven, Mushin indeed possessed a considerable number of participation slots for the upcoming operation. However, if Mushin gave these slots to Zero Wings members, Frost Heaven's guild leader and Grand Elders would definitely have opinions about it. In fact, if Zero Wings' participation adversely affected the operation, the bolder corporations standing within Frost Heaven might even suffer. Meanwhile, seeing that the female Cursemancer had stopped speaking, Mushin returned her gaze to Shifeng. "What do you think of this, guild leader Black Flame?" Mushin asked once more. "Will we receive the 50 bottles only if the operation succeeds?" Shifeng asked after giving the matter some thought. He had a great yearning for S-rank nutrient fluids. Setting aside his own needs, he also needed plenty of S-rank nutrient fluids for the development of Zero Wing's core upper echelon. Unlike the various superpowers, Zero Wing did not have a major corporation backing it, so the guild had a much more difficult time obtaining S-rank nutrient fluids. He had to admit that Mushin had accurately grasped Zero Wing's weakness. "Of course not. The 50 bottles are a deposit. If the operation is a success, I will pay you an additional 50 bottles, Mushin replied, her smile widening at Shifeng's question. "All right. I accept your invitation on behalf of Zero Wing," Shifeng said. When he heard that the remuneration was 100 bottles of S-rank nutrient fluids, he agreed to the offer without hesitation. "When will this secret operation take place? And how many players do I need to send?" "I can't give you an exact time yet, but judging by the current development, the operation will need a minimum of 11 or 12 days before it can start. As for the numbers, it's best if you bring no more than 10 players, Mushin replied after giving the matter some thought. She then pointed at the female Cursemancer beside her and continued, "Once the preparations on our side are done, I'll have Lishuan notify you." "Very well. I will make all the necessary preparations beforehand," Shifeng said, nodding. After Shifeng agreed to Mushin's invitation, the two of them formally signed a contract. Before the start of the secret operation, Mushin would supply Zero Wing with 50 bottles of S-rank nutrient fluid first. And so long as the operation was a success, Mushin would send another 50 bottles within 2 days of the operation's completion. "Guild leader, do you really intend to take part in Frost Heaven's secret operation?" Yulan asked worriedly after Mushin's group left the reception room. The fact that Frost Heaven is willing to offer 100 bottles of S-rank nutrient fluid as remuneration just goes to show how difficult this secret operation is. In fact, the operation might even come with great risks. If something untoward happens, Starlink and Saint's Hand will pounce on this opportunity. Now that Silverwing Town had been promoted into Silverwing City, the number of players and powers operating in Silverwing City was continuously increasing. According to their current estimates, they could easily make over 300,000 gold per day from the entrance fees alone. After deducting the various expenditures of the city, they should still net over 100,000 gold, and this didn't even take into account the income from the transportation firm. To put it simply, they had no need to take any risks. They were more than capable of amassing enough money to purchase a large amount of S-rank nutrient fluids, given some time. "I understand, but we'll also need to live long enough to make that kind of money," Shifeng replied with a bitter smile. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU if possible. He would prefer to refuse Mushin's offer as well. After all, S-rank nutrient fluids were not common goods that were readily available. Even for Frost Heaven, S-rank nutrient fluids were an extremely precious resource. The fact that Mushin was willing to pay such a hefty price for Zero Wing's help meant that the secret operation in question was incredibly difficult. However, 100 bottles of S-rank nutrient fluid would alleviate a significant portion of the pressure on Zero Wing. Not to mention, now that his identity had been exposed, purchasing S-rank nutrient fluids would become even more problematic than before. After Shifeng finished conversing with Yulan and had assigned all the necessary work in Silverwing City, he stealthily made his way to the core room located on the City Lord's mansion's second underground floor. He then took out a tattered scroll from his bag. "Although I haven't made all possible preparations, in order to ensure the success of my future operations, I have no choice but to get promoted as soon as possible." Gritting his teeth, Shifeng unfurled the legacy scroll he obtained from the ancient Lik Zorak and chanted the incantation recorded on it. Chapter 2686, Legacyland. Chapter 2686, Legacyland. As Shifeng chanted the incantation recorded on the legacy scroll, the divine runes on the legacy scroll started releasing an array of colorful lights that brightly illuminated the dimly lit core room. Following which, the divine runes detached from the legacy scroll and linked up into a ring before Shifeng. A short moment later, an incomparably dark vortex appeared within this ring of runes. The black vortex was 3 meters tall. Just its existence alone thinned out the mana within the core room considerably. The vortex was like an insatiable beast that devoured everything. Just how harsh is the environment in the Legacyland? Shifeng was astonished when he sensed the incomparably thin mana around him. Originally, he had planned to challenge his Tier 4 promotion quest only after he had broken through the limits of his epic mana body. That way, he would have a much greater chance of success. After all, unlike the promotion quests for lower tiers, the Tier 4 promotion quest did not have any difficulty options for players to choose from. How much improvement they gained from their Tier 4 promotion quest depended entirely on how much progress they made in the Legacyland. Of course, there were also some differences between Legacylands. Naturally, the harsher the environment at a Legacyland, the more difficult it would be for players to obtain their Tier 4 legacy. However, searching for Tier 4 Legacylands was arduous. In fact, when challenging the Tier 4 promotion quest, players generally spent 90% of their time searching for a Legacyland. In short, players would be very fortunate to come across a Legacyland. They didn't have the luxury to choose between different Legacylands. Hence, luck played a considerably important role when challenging the Tier 4 promotion quest. With luck, one would find a good Legacyland and have an easier time obtaining the Tier 4 legacy. Without it, one would find a Legacyland with an extremely harsh environment and might suffer failure as soon as they set foot into the Legacyland. This was a situation Shifeng had faced before. After all, he had failed plenty of times at his Tier 4 promotion quest in his past life. Currently, although he couldn't determine what kind of Legacyland the teleportation portal before him led to, judging by how the portal had devoured almost all of the core room's mana, he could tell that this Legacyland had incredibly thin ambient mana. In fact, the ambient mana density in the Legacyland should be even lower than that of the core room at the moment. However, before Shifeng could continue his observation, a series of system notifications entered his ears. System, you have opened the Legacyland's portal. Please enter the portal within 3 minutes, or the portal will automatically close. System, you have activated the promotion quest for the Tier 4, Blade Saint. Quest content, enter the Legacyland and obtain the Ancient Legacy's power. Rewards unknown. System, once you enter the Legacyland, you will be prohibited from having any contact with the outside world. If you die within the Legacyland, you will be teleported out of the Legacyland, your levels will be reduced by 5, and your soul will be weakened for 3 days. Please consider your decision carefully. 5 levels. This Legacyland is truly vicious. Shifeng frowned reflexively when he heard the contents of the system notifications. Normally, dying in a Tier 4 Legacyland would result in a loss of only 2 or 3 levels. The penalty for this one, however, was actually 5 levels. This was definitely the Legacyland with the highest penalty he had ever heard of. However, Shifeng did not hesitate for long before walking straight into the black vortex. If possible, he did not wish to enter such a harsh Legacyland, either. However, if he didn't enter, he would be deemed to have failed his Tier 4 promotion quest. If that happened, he would have to wait a considerable period before he could challenge his Tier 4 promotion quest again, an outcome he definitely didn't want. After all, aside from Frost Heaven's upcoming secret operation, the Divine Dragon's trial also awaited him. If he gave up on entering his Legacyland now, he would have to face the Divine Dragon's trial with only a Tier 3 body, basically setting himself up for failure. Hence, he had no other choice but to grit his teeth and take on this Legacyland. Fortunately, the Epic Legacy Scroll granted him 3 re-challenge attempts, 2 more than what the Dark Gold Legacy Scroll provided. Having a total of 4 challenge attempts increased his chances of success significantly. As soon as Shifeng stepped into the black vortex, darkness enveloped his vision. At the same time, his body seemed to spin freely in empty space. By the time his vision recovered, the scenery before him had changed completely. Currently, he was free falling. Moreover, not only was the sky dark, but spatial tears also filled the air around him. It was as if the world he had just arrived in was crumbling. There was no ground beneath him, either. All he could see below was a bottomless abyss. To make matters worse, the mana was practically non-existent. Shifeng was momentarily stunned by this situation. He had been to many legacy lands, but this was his first time visiting such a harsh legacy land. In fact, rather than a legacy land, this location looked more like a world teetering on the brink of destruction instead. If not for his epic mana body, he would have long since lost consciousness due to the extremely thin ambient mana here. Not daring to be careless, Shifeng promptly activated Gale Domain to put some distance between himself and the bottomless abyss below. However, shortly after he started flying, a powerful suction force came from the bottomless abyss, which made his body feel incomparably heavy. Is long-term flight prohibited here? Looking at the bottomless abyss that was pulling him down, Shifeng faintly understood the rules of this legacy land. He immediately headed for the nearest cliff. 400 yards. 300 yards. 200 yards. The longer Shifeng remained in flight, the stronger the gravity acting on his body grew. Initially, the gravity was only twice as strong as usual. Eventually, though, it increased to more than tenfold. Moreover, it continued increasing by twofold every second. Not only did this situation cause his flying speed to decrease continuously, but it also made controlling his body increasingly difficult. Faster. I need to be faster. When the gravity approached unbearable levels, Shifeng desperately tried to reach the cliff beside the abyss. When less than 20 yards separated him from the cliff, his ability to fly suddenly got neutralized. As a result, he plummeted toward the bottomless abyss like a meteor. To make matters worse, the gravity acting on his body still kept increasing, which, in turn, accelerated his speed of descent. This won't do. At this rate, I'll die from the wind pressure before I even hit the ground. After free falling for a dozen seconds, Shifeng already found the increasing wind pressure pushing against his body unbearable. At this rate, he would most likely die after another few dozen seconds of free fall. He took out a bunch of advanced frost grenades from his bag and detonated them on his back. Boom! 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 Along with the sounds of explosions, a series of ice flowers appeared in midair. Although Shifeng ended up losing over 20% of his HP and got himself covered in a layer of frost from the frost grenades, the impact of the explosions propelled his body a lot closer to the nearby cliff. However, despite the distance to the cliff narrowing, his complexion remained grim. After all, if he collided with the cliff at his current speed, he was still unlikely to survive. In the next moment, the armor Shifeng wore also started turning red-hot. Just as he was about to crash into the cliff like a blazing meteor, he activated Heavenly Dragon's power, instantly increasing his basic attributes, defense, and HP by a significant margin. He then unsheathed the abyssal blade and stabbed it into the cliff. Boom! After getting stabbed into the cliff wall, the abyssal blade tore the rocky surface as Shifeng continued sliding down. At the same time, his HP also started depleting rapidly. 75%. 60%. 30%. Fortunately, his body finally came to a grinding halt with his HP just below 500,000. After pulling himself out of the clutches of death, he breathed out a deep sigh of relief. If not for Heavenly Dragon's power, he really would have died just now. Is this really a legacy land? Confusion filled Shifeng's heart as he gazed at the bottomless abyss beneath him. Although legacy lands weren't known for their friendly environments, none of them had such a harsh environment, either. Currently, he couldn't see any signs of life in this legacy land, let alone monsters. Aside from the bottomless abyss, the only other thing within sight were the cliffs surrounding it. He couldn't find any traces of an ancient legacy at all. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. However, as Shifeng was trying to figure out what he needed to do in this legacy land, several thunderous roars came from the bottomless abyss. A short moment later, gigantic figures emerged from the abyss. And upon seeing these figures, Shifeng could not help being dumbfounded. How is this possible? Shifeng's eyes widened with astonishment as he gaped at these gigantic figures. After all, these figures belonged to the rarely seen dragon race. Meanwhile, these dragons had clearly discovered his presence already. Chapter 2687, Infant Black Dragons. Chapter 2687, Infant Black Dragons. Before Shifeng could snap out of his daze, the 3 black dragons with 60-meter wingspans flapped their wings and transformed into a blur as they flew straight at him. Infant Black Dragon, Great Lord, Level 122 HP 4, 200 0000004, 200 0000000. Crap. Shifeng cursed out loud when he saw the 3 infant black dragons zooming toward him. Although his opponents were merely Tier 3 infant dragons, as creatures belonging to the apex race in God's domain, they were still far stronger than ordinary Tier 4 mythic monsters. Not to mention, there were 3 of them. With the power these infant dragons wielded, they could easily destroy the current Silverwing city. They simply weren't existences individual Tier 3 players could hope to go up against. In fact, even Tier 4 players would have to take the long way around if they came across a force of 3 Tier 3 infant dragons. To make matters worse, not only was Shifeng currently stuck to a cliff, but an incredibly powerful gravitational force was also dragging on his body. Despite having Heavenly Dragon's power activated right now, he couldn't move his body normally. Clashing with these infant black dragons would simply guarantee an early death. He immediately unsheathed Killing Ray and stabbed it into the cliff wall, as well. He then started climbing up the cliff with all his might using his 2 swords. However, the gravitational pull from the abyss was simply too powerful, and Shifeng could not climb quickly, even if he wanted to. In the end, before he could climb 20 yards, one of the infant dragons had already arrived before him and sent its massive claw smashing at him. The speed of the claw was also so fast that his only option was to receive it. Scram! Shifeng bellowed as he swung the abyssal blade at the claw, the power the magic weapon carried so great that it even tore through space itself. When the abyssal blade came into contact with the infant dragon's claw, not only did the magic weapon repel the gigantic claw, but the force of the blow even pushed the infant dragon backward by more than 10 yards. This result shocked the infant dragon, and its golden eyes gazed at Shifeng in astonishment. As a member of the apex race that represented destruction, it had actually lost to a lower existence of the same tier in a direct confrontation. Normally, something like this should be impossible, yet this impossible feat had actually occurred just now. However, despite having repelled the infant dragon's attack, Shifeng did not show any signs of excitement at all. Due to the strength boost provided by the Heavenly Dragon's power and the Dragon's Domination passive skill, his strength indeed surpassed that of a level 122 infant black dragon. However, as he was currently stuck on the side of a cliff, the only thing he could do was passively defend against the infant dragon's attacks. He couldn't launch any counterattacks or run away. Meanwhile, Heavenly Dragon's power had a very limited duration. Once he lost the strength buff from the Berserk skill, he would have a much harder time coping with the infant dragon's attacks. Roar! As the repelled infant dragon roared angrily, another infant dragon appeared beside Shifeng and attacked him. While Shifeng had his hands full with the second infant dragon's attack, the first infant dragon, which had gotten repelled, actually opened its mouth and used dragon breath on him. Even with his current basic attributes, Shifeng did not dare take on the dragon breath of a true dragon. Gritting his teeth, he yanked Killing Ray out of the cliff and let the gravity drag himself down. When produced by a true dragon, a Tier 3 dragon breath carried enough power to rival even ordinary attacks at the peak Tier 4 standard. Moreover, dragon breath was an AoE attack, so defending against it with normal attacks was impossible. Although Shifeng had the option of using his mana technique, with how thin the ambient mana was in this legacy land, by the time he gathered enough mana to execute Light Shadow, he would have already been burned up by the infant dragon's dragon breath. Boom! In the next moment, a black beam struck at the spot where Shifeng was originally hanging and bored a hole into the cliff. As for Shifeng, after dodging the attack, he quickly stabilized himself further down the cliff. As expected of a true dragon breath, I'd probably get pushed back even if I used Light Shadow against it. Shifeng could not help his astonishment as he gazed at the massive hole that had appeared some distance above him. With just one attack, the infant black dragon had carved a hole with a 30-yard radius into the sturdy cliff. Shifeng, on the other hand, was just barely able to stab his swords into the cliff, even with the boost from Heavenly Dragon's power. Without the Berserk skill's help, he would be able to stab only half their length into the cliff, at best. However, before Shifeng could fully appreciate the infant black dragon's Tier 3 dragon breath, the two other infant dragons used their dragon breaths on him as well. Roar! Two black beams instantly shot at Shifeng, the range they covered making it utterly impossible for him to avoid them. Seeing this, Shifeng instinctively activated absolute defense to block the two dragon breaths. However, because the cliff he was clinging to got vaporized, he lost his foothold and started plummeting toward the bottomless abyss once more. It seems it's over. Shifeng could not help a bitter smile when he looked at the bottomless abyss beneath him, then the three infant black dragons chasing after him. Not only was there a bottomless abyss that exerted an insane gravitational pull on him, but there were even 3 infant black dragons roaming the area. The difficulty of this legacy land was simply unheard of. He couldn't even keep himself alive for more than a few minutes in this legacy land, much less search for the ancient legacy hidden here. In other words, this legacy land was basically made to toy with players seeking to challenge their Tier 4 promotion quest. However, just as Shifeng was mentally preparing himself to give up on his Tier 4 promotion quest, several gleaming lights suddenly appeared on the pitch-black cliff. The lights carried a faint hint of divine might that made his soul shudder involuntarily. The ancient legacy fragments. Shock and excitement flashed in Shifeng's eyes when he looked at the fading lights. Just now, he'd concluded that this legacy land was a prank on players. However, it now looked like that was not the case at all. Although the gleaming lights coming from the cliff had soon vanished from sight due to his rapid descent, he was certain he had sensed divine might coming from those lights. The Tier 4 promotion quest was basically a quest for players to enter a legacy land and obtain as much of their legacy's power as possible. Normal classes generally needed to accumulate 70% of their legacy's power to reach Tier 4, while peak classes needed roughly 85%. He had seen quite a few streaks of light on the cliff, which meant that there should be a considerable number of legacy fragments there. If he could reach that location, he might be able to obtain enough legacy power to complete his promotion quest. After reaching this conclusion, Shifeng abandoned the idea of giving up on this legacy land. Locating the legacy fragments hidden within a legacy land was generally incredibly difficult and time-consuming. Now that he knew where they were, he naturally couldn't give up without trying. However, despite his change of mind, thinking back to the 3 infant black dragons gave him a huge headache. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It might have been fine if his opponents were any other Great Lord-ranked monsters. In fact, even if he had to go up against 3 Tier 4 mythic monsters simultaneously, he was confident he could collect the legacy fragments while keeping himself alive. However, going up against 3 Tier 3 dragons simultaneously was simply too much. In fact, 1 infant black dragon would most likely be more than enough to whittle him to death within a short time. After all, the gravitational pull the abyss exerted was simply too powerful. While subjected to this gravitational pull, he couldn't bring out even half of his strength. At the same time, he didn't have any footholds he could shift to, which made dodging and blocking the infant dragon's attacks extraordinarily difficult. No, that's not right. So long as I can create a sufficient number of footholds, it might be possible to go up against 3 infant black dragons simultaneously with the dragon's domination's effect. While free-falling down the cliff, Shifeng suddenly recalled the gigantic holes the infant black dragons created. If he could carve out a sufficiently spacious path into the cliff, then defending himself against the 3 infant dragons wouldn't be an impossible dream. After thinking up to this point, he no longer waited for the abyss's gravitational pull to kill him. Instead, he took out the epic legacy scroll from his bag and activated it, starting another challenge for this legacy land. Chapter 2688, Legacy Land's True Purpose. Chapter 2688, Legacy Land's True Purpose. As soon as Shifeng activated the legacy scroll, darkness enveloped his vision once more, and the world seemed to spin around him. Everything was just like how he first walked into the dark vortex in the core room. The Legacy Scroll was a treasure highly sought after by the various superpowers, something they were willing to trade even fragmented legendary items for. And it was so coveted because it allowed players to re-challenge the same legacy land. While this function might not seem like much, it was heaven sent for players challenging their Tier 4 promotion quest. Normally, players had only one opportunity to challenge a legacy land. So long as they died, they would be teleported out of the legacy land, and the portal to the legacy land would disappear and reappear in another random location. Even if players found another legacy land portal later on, the chances of that portal leading to the same legacy land were abysmally low. Hence, it was almost impossible to challenge the same legacy land twice, which, in turn, made it impossible to learn from experience. For players, the difference between having a lot of experience when challenging a legacy land and challenging it cold was massive. Their chances of successfully clearing their Tier 4 promotion quest would skyrocket if they had foreknowledge of their legacy land. Hence, the various superpowers in the past had been willing to go as far as exchanging fragmented legendary items for legacy scrolls. In the eyes of ordinary players, this transaction would seem somewhat stupid. In reality, however, the difference between Tier 3 and Tier 4 was like the difference between life in the mud and in the clouds. Moreover, as players reached higher levels, the disparity in strength would only widen. After all, the opportunities Tier 3 and Tier 4 players could encounter and secure during the later stages of the game were completely different. Moreover, there was the difference in the amount of basic attributes Tier 3 and Tier 4 players gained whenever they leveled up. Meanwhile, after a short moment in the darkness, Shifeng reappeared in the sky above his first legacy land. And like before, his body started free-falling toward the bottomless abyss below him. Moreover, the cooldown of all of his skills and spells had been refreshed, the current situation making it seem as if he had gone back in time. Good. A quick check found that even the additional skills of his weapons and equipment had been refreshed. He immediately activated Gale Domain and flew straight to the nearest cliff. Previously, he had wasted a lot of time observing the legacy land. As a result, by the time he activated Gale Domain, the gravitational force acting on his body had already increased considerably, which had, in turn, reduced his speed and maneuverability by a significant margin. This time, though, as he had activated Gale Domain almost as soon as he arrived in the legacy land, he was able to fly at nearly double the speed he had before. In the end, he managed to reach the nearest cliff in just 15 seconds, with a lot of flight time, remaining. Break. After arriving before the cliff, Shifeng immediately executed Light Shadow at it. Boom. An explosion rang out as rubble went flying. However, to Shifeng's surprise, the Phantom Greatsword had only managed to carve out a single tear the size of a human adult, barely enough for one person to stand in. Light Shadow's power was actually reduced this much? Shifeng frowned at the tear in the cliff. The power of Light Shadow was much weaker than he expected. He had given his all in that attack, yet it had barely reached the intermediate rank Tier 4 standard. Had he used such an attack against the infant Black Dragon's Dragon Breath, he definitely would have ended up dead. However, Shifeng did not dare to waste time. Quickly, he executed Light Shadow against the cliff once more. By the 8th time he executed Light Shadow, Gale Domain finally expired. Fortunately, he had managed to carve out an adequate foothold for himself. With this foothold, he should have enough space to dodge and block the infant Black Dragon's attacks. However, when Shifeng gazed down at the bottomless abyss, he could not help massaging his temple. Although his current situation was much better than before, he still had massive problems to deal with. Setting aside the 3 infant dragons, just the fact that he needed to carve a path down the cliff was already a huge problem. Each use of Light Shadow only allowed him to carve out a small hole fit for one person to stand in. The hole was also only 1 meter deep. However, by his estimates, he needed to descend several kilometers to reach the area where he had seen the legacy fragments. In that case, he wouldn't be able to reach the legacy fragments even after executing Light Shadow for a month. Although he could increase the destructive power of his attacks by using berserk skills were meant to save his life. They should not be used unless absolutely necessary, especially in this godforsaken legacy land. There were simply too many unknown dangers here. If he used up his berserk skills too quickly, he would definitely die when a truly dangerous situation popped up. It seems I have to find a way to increase the power of my attacks. After giving the matter some thought, Shifeng concluded that this was his only option. Using summoning tools was impossible while inside a legacy land. Players weren't allowed to summon their personal guards here. In such a situation, the only way he could reach the legacy fragments as quickly as possible was to raise the raw power of his attacks. However, such a feat was easier said than done. The mana technique Light Shadow was currently the strongest move in his repertoire. Even bronze combat techniques could not hold a candle to it. However, if he simply relied on Light Shadow to carve a path down, he wouldn't reach the legacy fragments even if he tired himself to death. He needed a qualitative improvement to his raw power. If I wish to increase the power of my attacks, aside from breaking through the limits of my mana body, the only other option is to improve my mana technique. Without any inspirations, trying to break through the mana body's perfect state is utterly impossible. In that case, I have no choice but to try to master the second sword, Holy Devour. As Shifeng sensed the mana surrounding him, an idea struck him. Although the environment here is extremely harsh and the density of the mana here is close to zero, my brain doesn't feel any discomfort. The environment here is roughly similar to that inside the Legacy Gate. Could the environment here be created for the purpose of helping players learn mana techniques? Having thought up to this point, Shifeng felt that there was a high possibility of his guess being correct. Legacy lands were termed as such because they provided guidance to their challengers. They weren't created to extinguish all life. Meanwhile, in low mana environments, players would have an easier time not only sensing the mana flowing within their mana bodies but also training in mana techniques. This was because the ability to control one's mana played an important role in executing a mana technique. And in a low mana environment, players wouldn't have to deal with as much interference from the ambient mana as they normally would, which, in turn, allowed them to perceive and control their mana better. Moreover, it was important for players seeking to get promoted to Tier 4 to possess an adequate degree of mana control, aside from fully unlocking their mana bodies. After all, the birth of a mana domain relied heavily on a player's ability to control mana. Shifeng unsheathed the abyssal blade and started trying to execute the second sword, Holy Devour. The most important point to take note of when executing Light Shadow was the shaping of mana. The complexity of the technique involved in doing so could inspire despair even in peak experts. Only domain realm experts that had developed their mana control to a certain extent could execute Light Shadow. Holy Devour, on the other hand, required its user to materialize mana. Without sufficient understanding of the operating principle and structure of mana, executing Holy Devour would be utterly impossible. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Previously, Shifeng had not held much hope of learning how to execute Holy Devour while he was still at Tier 3. After all, the degree of perception and control of mana required to execute the technique reached in human levels. However, due to the Faux Saint Devourer's soul marks, his perception of mana had undergone a qualitative transformation. In the next moment, Shifeng shut his eyes and lightly raised the abyssal blade with both hands. He then manipulated his mana domain to start gathering as much mana as possible around the abyssal blade. After draining all the ambient mana, Shifeng abruptly opened his eyes and swung the abyssal blade at the cliff wall before him. Holy Devour. Chapter 2689, Simplified Holy Devour. Chapter 2689, Simplified Holy Devour. As Shifeng swung down the abyssal blade, a bundle of blazing red flames enveloped the magic weapon, causing even the surrounding space to tremble. In the next moment, the blazing red flames devoured the cliff wall before him. Boom! Along with the sound of an explosion, countless stone fragments went flying. Originally, the cave Shifeng had dug for himself was only the size of a small room. Now, however, the cave had grown to the size of a small house. Moreover, its walls were extremely smooth as if they had been polished. So strong. Surprise flashed in Shifeng's eyes as he took in the cave before him. He had only been trying to execute Holy Devour. He never thought that he would actually succeed on the first attempt. Although the second sword he executed was many times weaker than the Heavenly Blue Saints version and could even be considered incomplete, the power of his attack was already close to the upper rank Tier 4 standard. With such destructive power, his efficiency in carving out a path to the legacy fragments should improve by several dozen times. However, just as Shifeng thought of using Holy Devour once more, his consciousness suddenly wavered, and a stinging pain assaulted his brain. Sure enough, it is still too much for my current self to execute Holy Devour. Shifeng could not help a bitter smile at this situation. He had indeed succeeded in executing Holy Devour. However, the amount of concentration he had consumed by using it once was equivalent to executing over a dozen bronze combat techniques simultaneously. With such a high consumption rate, he would run out of concentration after using Holy Devour 3 or 4 more times. Moreover, he was able to achieve such a result only because his concentration had reached the Tier 4 standard already. Had his concentration remained at the Tier 3 standard, he would have most likely passed out as soon as he executed the first Holy Devour. However, just as Shifeng was thinking of how he could further perfect his Holy Devour to reduce the burden on his concentration, a tremor suddenly rocked the cave. Before he could react to this unexpected development, the rubble scattered around the cave suddenly gathered and formed a humanoid golem that was as tall as he was. The moment the golem took shape, it released a frightening pulse of mana that froze the ambient mana, making it impossible for him to manipulate the ambient mana at all. Outer Path Guardian, non-elemental creature, Grand Lord, level 121 HP 53 500 00053 500 000. A non-elemental creature? Shifeng was a little surprised when he saw the Outer Path Guardian. He'd never heard of the non-elemental creature label before. Normally, if a monster wasn't an elemental creature, they would be labeled with their race, such as giant, elf, wild creature, orc, and so on. Before Shifeng could properly digest this situation, the Outer Path Guardian suddenly appeared before him. Its 2 arms then transformed into razor-sharp rock blades that cut at him, the attack speed it displayed surpassing that of ordinary Grand Lords and nearly rivaling mythic monsters. However, Shifeng was no pushover, either. With his extraordinary combat standard and basic attributes, even mythic monsters of the same level would have difficulty landing attacks on him, let alone a Grand Lord whose speed was merely close to rivaling mythic monsters. In the next moment, Shifeng brandished the abyssal blade. Swords transmigration. Peng. 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 In the blink of an eye, Shifeng deflected over a dozen attacks. Immediately afterward, he sent a counterattack cutting at the Path Guardian. In the next moment, a pitch-black sword light cut at the Path Guardian's body. A metallic clang echoed in the cave as the sword light came into contact with the Path Guardian. However, to Shifeng's surprise, not only did his attack fail to injure the Path Guardian, but the impact even made himself stumble half a step back. The abyssal blade he wielded also vibrated violently as if it had just struck on an impenetrable wall. What kind of monster is this? Shifeng stared at the Outer Path Guardian in astonishment. The abyssal blade was capable of cutting through even the skin of superior mythics, yet not only did the magic weapon fail to scratch the Outer Path Guardian's body, but the Grand Lord didn't even lose a single HP from the attack. The Guardian's defense was simply heaven-defying. Regardless of Shifeng's surprise, the Path Guardian did not stop its actions, launching attacks at him one after another. Even after fighting for several minutes consecutively, the Path Guardian showed no signs of weakening or slowing down at all. It was like a tireless machine. Although Shifeng had landed over 100 attacks on the Path Guardian, he had failed to cause any damage whatsoever to the Grand Lord. Even Light Shadow was useless against it. Is it invulnerable? Shifeng's head ached as he continuously deflected the Path Guardian's attacks. Previously, he had seen hope of obtaining the legacy fragments. He never imagined that a monster like the Outer Path Guardian would appear after he destroyed the cliff wall. Despite the Path Guardian having only a little over 50 million HP, which was very low for a level 121 Grand Lord, he actually failed to make a dent. At this rate, he would collapse from exhaustion before he could even secure the legacy fragments. Time passed quickly. Before Shifeng realized it, over a dozen minutes had elapsed already. However, despite having attacked every possible weak point he could find on the Outer Path Guardian, he still hadn't damaged the Grand Lord. To make matters worse, the frozen ambient mana meant that he experienced none of the recovery effects he would normally experience when surrounded by mana. He would collapse from exhaustion after another hour of fighting at this rate. Screw it. Shi Feng gritted his teeth and gripped the abyssal blade with both hands before executing Holy Devour against the outer path guardian. If even this is no good, I'll have no choice but to use berserk skills. Holy Devour was currently the strongest move he could execute without transforming into a Black Dragon King. If even Holy Devour was incapable of harming the Path Guardian, he would have to use a berserk skill to boost his strength further, something he wished to avoid doing if possible. Immediately, a scorching inferno engulfed the outer Path Guardian. Boom! In the next moment, the Path Guardian's body shot out of the blazing inferno like a cannonball and smashed into the back of the cave. Cracks formed on the Path Guardian's originally invulnerable body, and the Grand Lord's HP also fell by over 3.7 million. It was effective. Shi Feng was surprised as he looked at the Path Guardian lying on the ground. Previously, even Light Shadow failed to damage the outer Path Guardian. However, not only did Holy Devour succeed in damaging the Path Guardian, but its effects even far exceeded his initial expectations. Did I break through its defensive limit? Shi Feng wondered. However, he quickly shook his head and denied the thought. No, that's not right. Even if my attack exceeded the Guardian's defensive limit, it shouldn't have produced such overwhelming results. He had plenty of experience in surpassing a monster's defensive limit. Hence, he knew that exceeding a monster's defensive limit wouldn't allow him to suddenly go from dealing 0 damage to dealing over 3.7 million damage. Moreover, normally, even if one failed to exceed a monster's defensive limit, the monster should still receive some form of damage after receiving an attack. A non-elemental creature, a mana screen, and Holy Devour. Shi Feng continuously racked his mind as he watched the outer Path Guardian slowly standing back up. Although he had successfully damaged the Path Guardian already, in his current state, he could execute Holy Devour only 1 or 2 more times. Hence, his situation remained dire. It was necessary for him to identify the reason why he had succeeded in damaging the Path Guardian. Otherwise, even if he activated his berserk skill, he would only end up wasting it. Following which, Shi Feng arrived before the Path Guardian and executed Light Shadow against it. However, just like the last time he had used the mana technique, he failed to inflict any damage on the Grand Lord. Since Light Shadow is ineffective against it, I'll have to use another method. Seeing the Path Guardian slashing its 2-blade hands at him once more, Shi Feng sidestepped, then slipped behind the Guardian. He concentrated his mana within the abyssal blade as if he were executing Holy Devour, but did not let any of the mana escape the magic weapon. Consequently, instead of a blazing inferno, only a small layer of flames appeared around the abyssal blade as he sent the magic weapon slashing down at the Path Guardian's back. In the next moment, the abyssal blade actually cut into the Path Guardian's sturdy body, inflicting over 1.6 million damage on the Grand Lord. Sure enough, Shi Feng's eyes glowed with excitement at the success of his attack. After seeing that Holy Devour was highly effective against the Path Guardian while Light Shadow was completely ineffective, it was clear to Shi Feng that the Path Guardian's defensive limit had nothing to do with why one could deal damage to it while the other couldn't. Instead, the reason for this situation lay in the difference between the two techniques, the method of utilizing mana. Light Shadow was a technique that gave shape to mana, whereas Holy Devour was a technique that caused mana to go berserk before materializing it to exhibit a frighteningly destructive power that could destroy even the very essence of matter. Currently, although he did not fully execute Holy Devour, he had materialized his mana and concentrated it on the abyssal blade. By doing so, he was able to drastically reduce his consumption of mana and concentration while still utilizing the effects of materialized mana. Only, the raw power and scale of his attack were considerably smaller compared to those of the real Holy Devour. Basically, he had executed a simplified version of Holy Devour. Meanwhile, after achieving success once, Shi Feng promptly started bombarding the Path Guardian with attacks. In terms of combat power, the outer Path Guardian was significantly inferior to ordinary mythic monsters. The only thing that made it a challenging foe was the fact that it could be damaged only after certain conditions were met. However, now that Shifeng had met these conditions, the Path Guardian's 53.5 million HP was nothing. In less than 2 minutes, Shifeng had depleted all of the outer Path Guardian's HP. The Guardian's rocky body then crumbled and scattered on the ground. Meanwhile, along with the outer Path Guardian's death, not only did Shifeng's experience bar fill up by a significant margin, but a stream of black mist also flowed into his heart. In the next moment, fragmented images appeared before him one after another. At the same time, a system notification also entered his ears. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. System. You have obtained 5 legacy power points. Tier 4 legacy completion rate at 0.5%. When legacy completion rate reaches 85%, you may attempt to activate your Tier 4 legacy. Legacy power? Shifeng was surprised to see the system notification. He never thought that killing the outer Path Guardian would actually grant him legacy power. Collecting legacy power using this method would be much easier than trying to descend into the abyss and reach the legacy fragments. Meanwhile, shortly after the outer Path Guardian died, its body exploded into bundles of light that hovered quietly in midair, expelling all the mana in the surrounding space. Chapter 2690, Unknown Metal Fragments. Chapter 2690, Unknown Metal Fragments. What a powerful phenomenon. Shifeng's heart was filled with surprise when he saw the dozen or so items quietly hovering in midair. He had seen many kinds of monster loot before. He had even seen loot accompanied by a holy chant. However, this was the first time he had seen or heard of the phenomenon the outer Path Guardian's loot created. Currently, all mana within a 50-yard radius of the dropped items was getting banished from the area. Even the mana within his body was rapidly depleting. Right now, if a player with a silver mana body were standing here, they would most likely have lost consciousness instantly from mana exhaustion. Seeing this situation, Shifeng did not dare hesitate for too long. Immediately, he stepped forward and tried to store the loot in his bag space. However, the instant he touched one of the dropped items, a system notification entered his ears. System. This item should not be stored, as it has an extremely powerful repulsion toward mana. Storing it in your epic spatial bag involves a certain degree of danger. Do you wish to store this item in your epic spatial bag? Should not be stored. Shifeng was quite surprised at the system notification. However, despite his surprise, he still chose to store the loot in his epic spatial bag. After all, he would lose his life if he didn't put the items into his bag space and allowed the mana repulsion field to continue existing. As he stored the items in his bag one after another, the mana environment within the cave gradually recovered. Upon seeing this, he could not help a sigh of relief. How close! These items truly are strange. Had I been a few seconds later in taking action, they probably would have drained all my mana. Sitting down, Shifeng shuddered involuntarily as he checked the 15 new items inside his bag space. Previously, the outer Path Guardian was already plenty astonishing, as it could actually freeze the mana around it, preventing players from using the ambient mana. For players that relied heavily on skills and spells during combat, this was a fatal ability. However, these dropped items were even more amazing. They had directly banished all the mana within a 50-yard radius. Not even the mana within his body was exempt. This situation was simply unheard of. If players encountered these extraordinary items without any means to store the items, they would definitely meet their deaths. Despite Shifeng's wariness toward these items, he could not hold back his curiosity and started inspecting them. After he used his identification skill on these items, he was stunned. He couldn't appraise any of these 15 metal fragments. Even after he activated omniscient eyes, all he got was that these metal fragments were named as unknown metal fragment and that they were originally part of a weapon. Crap. What kind of weapon was it? Isn't it a little too amazing? Just its fragments alone are so powerful already. Even legendary weapons are not that powerful. Shifeng was astonished when he saw the little information omniscient eyes obtained. In God's domain, legendary items usually deteriorated into fragmented legendary items because their core component had suffered damage, which prevented them from exhibiting their true might. However, if a legendary weapon got shattered into numerous fragments, rather than becoming multiple fragmented legendary weapons, the legendary weapon would become garbage. Only if the shards were recast and more material was added was there a chance of them becoming a fragmented legendary weapon. Yet, despite not having undergone any rework, the fragments in his bag still exhibited such a powerful mana repulsion effect. Even the strongest legendary weapons he had heard of were unlikely to be so powerful. However, Shifeng did not dwell on the metal fragments. After getting enough rest, he left them sitting inside his bag space and resumed attacking the cliff wall. Since he now knew that the outer path guardians provided legacy power and that the guardians spawned from the rubble of the cliff, he naturally wouldn't let this opportunity to kill two birds with one stone get away. However, despite Shifeng repeatedly using Holy Devour on the cliff wall, not every attack of his caused an outer path guardian to spawn. Roughly one guardian spawned for every 3 or 4 attacks he executed. As a result, his accumulation of legacy power wasn't going as fast as he initially expected. Moreover, because of the legacy land's harsh environment, which severely hampered stamina and concentration recovery, Shifeng's recovery rate wasn't particularly fast despite the high-ranking foods and beverages he consumed. At best, it was like he was resting inside an ordinary town. Fortunately, he was familiar with the harsh environments of Tier 4 legacy lands and had made preparations beforehand. Long before he could challenge his Tier 4 promotion quest, he had already tasked Melancholic Smile with stockpiling a large amount of high-ranking foods and beverages in the guild's warehouse for both himself and the rest of the guild's core upper echelon. Hence, he currently had more than enough high-ranking foods and beverages to last him for 2 whole months. As Shifeng relentlessly attacked the cliff and killed outer path guardians, his experience bar filled up rapidly. His mastery over the simplified Holy Devour also improved. Only, as the number of outer path guardians he killed increased, the number of unknown metal fragments he obtained conversely decreased. Initially, each kill yielded him more than 10 fragments. Eventually, that number dropped to single digits. Now, he got just 1 or 2 from every kill. As Shifeng progressed down the cliff, he had unknowingly spent 9 days inside the legacy land. After 9 days of constant grinding, Shifeng had reached level 124. If not for demon god Atlok's soul curse, he would have already reached the level 125 threshold. As for the accumulation of legacy power, he had reached 83% completion rate already, just 2% away from the minimum requirement to activate his Tier 4 legacy. As for the unknown metal fragments, he had collected a total of 96. Meanwhile, a lot had also happened in the outside world during these 9 days. Thanks to the 50 bottles of S-rank nutrient fluids Mushin provided as a deposit, Shifeng could afford to consume 1 bottle per day, meeting the energy requirements of his brain. His body's condition also improved considerably. However, if he wished to recover to his peak state, he still needed life potions. Aside from that, Zero Wing's main force members also started exiting the spatial maze one after another. However, as Fire Dance, Aqua Rose, Gentle Snow, and 24 or so other players had taken different paths midway through the maze, they remained trapped inside. Along with the return of the majority of Zero Wing's main force, the prosperous Zero Wing flourished even more. After returning to the eastern continent, Zero Wing's main force members continuously raided large-scale and super-large-scale team dungeons, enriching the guild warehouse with plenty of rare materials. Including the rare materials brought back from the western continent, Melancholic Smile and the others produced batch after batch of level 120 weapons and equipment. Now, when it came to level 120 weapons and equipment, Zero Wing surpassed the various superpowers. For a time, Zero Wing entered the spotlight of the neighboring kingdoms and empires, and many expert players and well-known adventurer teams applied to join Zero Wing. However, during all of this, a very shocking matter got exposed. The true identity of Zero Wing's mysterious guild leader, Black Flame. When this information spread, it shocked the Eastern Continent's various powers. This was especially true for Unyielding Soul, Crimson Emperor, and the Secret Pavilion, superpowers that were partners of Zero Wing. None of them had ever thought that Zero Wing was truly a guild that had no background whatsoever and that a youth like Shifeng had developed it from scratch. God's domain's various powers no longer feared Zero Wing. Many powers started secretly targeting Zero Wing's internal members. At the same time, they spent huge sums to snatch the Heaven's Rumble Training Center's disciples and customers of Zero Wing's virtual combat platforms. They even offered astronomical prices to poach Zero Wing's core members, resulting in a brain drain of Zero Wing's internal members and core members day after day. Guild leader, another dozen core members have applied for withdrawal today. In addition, quite a few training centers and dojos disciples have come challenging our training center's disciples, and several of our disciples got injured. Even Master Lei Bao himself got challenged by a mysterious half-step grandmaster martial artist on his way home and ended up suffering heavy injuries. That mysterious expert warned Master Lei Bao that if he remained in Zero Wing, there would be more of such incidents. Moreover, several superpowers have sent representatives to our headquarters. They say that so long as we let them become shareholders of Zero Wing, they'll make all these problems go away, Liang Jing reported in frustration. However, these still aren't the most crucial matters. The biggest problem is that the suppliers that previously provided us with S-rank nutrient fluids and state-of-the-art training facilities now refuse to do business with us. Moreover, nobody is commissioning our guild for tasks anymore. At this rate, we can only rely on exchanging coins for credits to maintain our guild's daily operations. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. I understand. For now, make use of Silverwing City's income to fill in the gaps, Shifeng said, nodding. Also, did you find out which superpower sent that expert that injured Lei Bao? I checked with the secret pavilion. Although the other party hid themselves quite thoroughly, the secret pavilion still managed to find out who sent that expert. It's Dragonheart Island's War Blood Adventurer team, Liang Jing said. War Blood? In an icy tone, Shifeng said, it seems these superpowers really think Zero Wing is some kind of pushover. Do they honestly believe I can't do anything against them? Guild leader, we don't have the home ground advantage on Dragonheart Island. Moreover, Starlink and a few other superpowers have partnered with War Blood. They also have a medium fortress. Right now, our forces are tied up defending Silverwing City and Stone Forest City. If we dispatch a large number of experts to Dragonheart Island, I'm afraid, when Liang Jing heard Shifeng's words, she hurriedly tried to dissuade him from taking any rash actions. I know. I'll handle this matter myself, Shifeng said calmly before hopping back into his virtual gaming cabin and logging into God's domain. Chapter 2691, Breaking Through the Limit. Chapter 2691, Breaking Through the Limit. The gravitational force here is almost the same as what I felt when those infant black dragons appeared. If I continue digging downward, those dragons will most likely notice my presence. After killing another Outer Path Guardian, Shifeng poked his head out of the platform he had carved for himself to look at the bottomless abyss. After 9 days of arduous effort, he had finally reached the altitude where he first came into contact with the infant black dragons. Although the infant black dragons were only Tier 3 Great Lords, they were existences that no individual Tier 3 player could hope to go up against. Not to mention, there were 3 infant black dragons moving together here. Currently, the best way for him to complete his Tier 4 promotion was through killing more Outer Path Guardians and steadily accumulating his legacy power to 85% completion rate. Then, he could activate his Tier 4 legacy. However, as he carved his way down the cliff, the frequency of the Outer Path Guardian's appearance decreased. In fact, the Guardian he had just killed took him nearly an hour to spawn. At this rate, he would most likely enter the 3 infant black dragons' perception range by the time he could spawn the next Outer Path Guardian. In that case, he would have to fight the Outer Path Guardian while simultaneously dealing with the 3 dragons' attacks. Sure enough, the main god system won't let players enjoy such an easy promotion. In the end, I still have to obtain one of those legacy fragments. Shifeng could not help a sigh as he looked at his legacy power points. With his current standards, so long as he activated a berserk skill, swiftly killing an Outer Path Guardian while dealing with the attacks of the 3 infant black dragons should be possible. However, He was still short of 3 Guardian kills to reach the minimum 85% completion rate. Even though he had multiple Berserk skills, the likelihood of him being able to spawn and kill 3 Outer Path Guardians during the limited duration of his Berserk skills was extremely low. After all, the last Outer Path Guardian had taken him nearly an hour to spawn. At best, he would be able to kill 1 Guardian after getting discovered by the infant dragons. As for the remaining 2 Outer Path Guardians, he could forget about them because no matter how he looked at it, coping with the infant dragon's attacks for 2 or 3 hours while he continued carving the cliff was simply impossible. This left him with only one option to complete his promotion quest, obtaining a legacy fragment. While legacy fragments didn't carry equal amounts of legacy power, each contained at least 10 points to as much as 40 points. With his current legacy power points, he needed only 1 legacy fragment to meet the minimum requirement to activate his Tier 4 legacy. Although the completion rate of one's Tier 4 legacy would somewhat influence the success rate of the Tier 4 promotion quest, it wasn't absolute. Legacy power only allowed players to activate their Tier 4 legacy. The more legacy power players managed to collect, the larger the portion of their Tier 4 legacy they could activate. However, after activating and unraveling the secrets of their Tier 4 legacy, players needed to learn the unraveled knowledge in order to complete their Tier 4 promotion quest. Clearing this portion of their promotion quest depended entirely on their own capabilities. The amount of legacy power they accumulated before had no bearing on this part of the quest. And if players failed to learn an adequate amount of knowledge from their legacy within the stipulated time, they would still fail their Tier 4 promotion quest. In the past, the main reason why most Tier 3 experts failed to reach Tier 4 was precisely this second portion, not the failure to acquire a sufficient amount of legacy power. This was also the reason why the stronger a legacy was, the more difficult the Tier 4 promotion quest would be. The stronger a legacy was, the more complex the information contained within it. For example, legacies belonging to the giant and elven race contained incredibly abstruse information. Hence, those playing as giants and elves faced much greater difficulty when challenging their promotion quests. Even if players geared themselves in powerful weapons and equipment, these items would just allow them to obtain more legacy power and open up more knowledge for them to learn. Players still had to rely on their own learning capabilities to complete their Tier 4 promotion quest. Hence, Shifeng could activate his legacy at 85% completion rate. Reaching 100% wasn't necessary for the completion of his promotion quest. However, trying to reach and obtain the legacy fragments below wouldn't be easy. After all, he had to go up against 3 infant black dragons in the process. There was only so much he could do within the limited duration of his Berserk skills. The part where he obtained the legacy fragments would be especially challenging. If a player that did not know how legacy fragments worked were in his shoes right now, they would most likely lose their lives during this process. Players would not automatically obtain the legacy power contained within a legacy fragment. Instead, after securing the fragment, they usually spent between 10 to 20 minutes absorbing the legacy power. And although players did not need direct contact with a legacy fragment to absorb its legacy power, if they went too far away from the fragment, the process would get interrupted, and the fragment would shatter. Due to these reasons, players generally needed to complete the process in a safe environment. With the 3 infant dragons harassing Shifeng, he obviously wouldn't be able to absorb a legacy fragment in safety. He would have to do it while fighting. However, with the Berserk skills he had, he simply wouldn't be able to last that long. No, it's not exactly impossible. If I can hold on for some time in my normal state, it might be possible to secure a legacy fragment. After giving the matter some thought, Shifeng decided to take the risk and try to secure a legacy fragment. After all, he was no longer the same as when he first entered the Legacy Land. Not only was he able to execute Holy Devour now, but he had even mastered a simplified version of Holy Devour. Although this simplified Holy Devour was not as powerful as the real deal, the raw power it contained was still superior to that of Light Shadow. With this simplified Holy Devour, he might be able to hold his own against the infant black dragons. After taking a deep breath, he took out the Ring of Gospel from his bag and activated Miniature World and Ring of Brilliance. Now that he had gotten this far in his promotion quest and he had to go up against the 3 infant dragons no matter what, he no longer had any reason to hold back his cards. Upon Ring of Brilliance's activation, the density of the ambient mana gradually increased. As for Shifeng himself, his basic attributes rose by 5%. Although Ring of Brilliance's effects were significantly weakened, every little improvement counted now. After activating both of the Ring of Gospel skills, he jumped off the platform and allowed gravity to drag him down toward the bottomless abyss. A few seconds after he started his free fall to the abyss, a series of dragon roars came from some distance away. As he had predicted, the 3 infant black dragons flew out of the abyss and charged straight at him once more. A short moment later, one of the infant dragons arrived before Shifeng and sent its gigantic claw smashing at him. Seemingly unaffected by miniature world, the dragon's claw still carried enough power to tear through space. This hit will determine whether I can succeed or not. Having prepared for this attack beforehand, Shifeng promptly lashed out against the approaching claw with the abyssal blade. In the next moment, the blazing red abyssal blade cut at the infant dragon's massive claw. Boom! When the two attacks collided, a loud metallic clang echoed throughout the abyss, and dazzling sparks illuminated the space around Shifeng and the infant black dragon. Surprisingly, the dragon's massive claw actually got knocked off course and smashed into the cliff wall nearby, digging out a huge chunk of the cliff. Shifeng, on the other hand, came out of the clash completely unscathed. Moreover, the impact accelerated his descent into the abyss even further. Good. There's a chance. Shifeng grew ecstatic when the abyssal blade deflected the infant dragon's claw. Previously, his greatest worry was that he would not be able to block the infant black dragon's attacks. After all, he did not activate Heavenly Dragon's power, unlike before. Besides, the infant black dragons had the home ground advantage, free of the abyss's suppression. Even with the effects of miniature world, he would most likely have a difficult time deflecting the infant dragon's attacks. Fortunately, the simplified Holy Devour was sufficiently powerful. Now, even without activating a berserk skill, he could hold his ground against the infant black dragons. With this, what he needed to do next became a lot simpler. Following which, Shifeng continued free-falling while frantically deflecting the 3 infant dragons' attacks. When he was about to reach the location of the legacy fragments, he activated Gale Domain and forcefully changed his angle of descent toward the legacy fragments. After spotting the location of the legacy fragments, Shifeng promptly activated Power of Darkness, increasing all his basic attributes by 120%, then executed a 2-handed slash at the cliff wall. Holy Devour! A raging inferno immediately devoured the cliff wall, creating a hole with a 30-yard radius. At the same time, a fragmented statue the size of a human adult landed inside the hole, radiating a faint glow and a soul-shuddering divine might. System, you have discovered a legacy fragment. Do you wish to absorb the fragment's legacy power? Absorb. Shifeng said without hesitation. As soon as he finished speaking, the fragmented statue released an aurora of lights that pierced his body. Crap! Just how much legacy power is in this thing? Shifeng was stunned when he saw the loading bar that appeared before him. According to the loading bar, the absorption process would take 33 minutes. This absorption time far exceeded his expectations. It also far exceeded the total duration of all of his berserk skills. However, under the circumstances, he did not have the leeway to go for a different fragment. If he chose to give up on this fragment, then all of the effort he had put into killing all those outer path guardians would go to waste. At this time, the 3 infant black dragons noticed what Shifeng was doing. Immediately, all 3 of them used dragon breath at him. Damn it! Shifeng's complexion darkened when he saw that the 3 dragon breaths covered the entire cave he was in. Instinctively, he activated absolute defense to protect himself. After the 3 dragon breaths landed, the size of the cave increased significantly, which gave Shifeng a lot more room for maneuvering. Following which, time flew as Shifeng desperately defended himself against the 3 infant dragons' attacks. 10 minutes. 15 minutes. 20 minutes. Only 30 minutes had elapsed by the time the duration of Shifeng's final berserk skill, disintegration power, expired. Although he had done his best to fight in his normal state as much as possible and only use his berserk skills when absolutely necessary, he still exhausted all his berserk skills by the 30-minute mark. Without the support of any berserk skills, he had no choice but to rely on the simplified Holy Devour to defend against the 3 infant dragons' attacks. However, although the simplified Holy Devour required less concentration to execute than even Light Shadow, the burden from spamming the technique still took its toll on him. As a result, his complexion grew paler as more time passed. Human, your time is up. You're almost out of stamina and concentration already. While we are still able to continue fighting, don't even think of leaving alive after you've trespassed into the territory of black dragons. The leading infant black dragon spoke in an ancient language. Despite Shifeng having no knowledge of this language, his mind actually understood the infant dragon's words. No sooner had the infant black dragon finished speaking than the 2 other infant dragons increased their attack rate, giving Shifeng no room to catch a breather. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. As the 3 infant black dragons' attack rate continuously increased, Shifeng had no choice but to use his trump cards one after another. Darkness Domain, Thunder God's Descent, Divine Steps, Void Shield. However, his complexion paled subsequently with each trump card he expended. His brain was also plagued by a stinging pain that dulled his control over his body. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Is this it for me? At this moment, Shifeng could tell that he had already exceeded the limits of his concentration and that he was losing control over his physical body. Now, he couldn't execute the simplified Holy Devour anymore, completely reliant on dodging the 3 infant dragons' attacks to keep himself alive. Void Shield's duration was also about to run out, and as soon as it did, the 3 infant dragons would instantly kill him. Just as Void Shield's duration was about to end, however, a system notification sounded in Shifeng's ears. System, congratulations. Your Tier 4 legacy completion rate has reached 102%. Do you wish to activate your Tier 4 legacy? Chapter 2692, Tier 4 Legacy that surpasses 100%. Chapter 2692, Tier 4 Legacy that surpasses 100%. 102%? Despite his waning consciousness, when Shifeng heard the system's mechanical voice, he could not help getting startled. In his previous life, he had never heard of anyone accumulating their Tier 4 legacy's completion rate beyond 100%. At best, one could raise it to 100% and fully unlock all the information their Tier 4 legacy offered. Now, however, his Tier 4 legacy had reached 102% completion rate. Just what did that mean? Shifeng did not dwell on the matter. Now that he had met the requirements to activate his Tier 4 legacy, he activated it without hesitation. Unfortunately, even after he had chosen to activate his Tier 4 legacy, the 3 infant black dragons showed no signs of letting up. In the next moment, one of the dragon's claws smashed down at Shifeng. Damn it! Even if players managed to activate their Tier 4 legacy, it did not mean that their promotion quest was over. Only after learning an adequate amount of the information contained in their Tier 4 legacy and leaving the legacy land safely would players be considered to have completed their Tier 4 promotion quest. Since there was no room for Shifeng to dodge the approaching claw and he had no concentration left to execute the simplified Holy Devour, he chose to block the attack with his 2 swords. Boom! Shifeng's entire body smashed into the ground with a boom. At the same time, cracks formed on his Void Shield. Thank goodness I have the Void Shield to absorb the attack's damage. Otherwise, that move would have taken away at least 1/5 of my HP. Shifeng inwardly celebrated when he saw the cracks on the Void Shield. With the infant black dragons having the home ground advantage, even if he had the heavenly dragon's breath strengthening him and suppressing the dragons, the disparity in strength between the 2 sides was still massive. Only if he activated a berserk skill would he stand a chance against the dragons. However, as soon as Shifeng pulled himself out of the ground, another claw attack came at him. To make matters worse, before the claw attack even arrived, Void Shield's duration ended, and the barrier protecting him shattered into oblivion. The movement speed bonus he received from Void Shield also disappeared. As a result, he could rely on only his normal speed to dodge the approaching claw. Foolish human. Now that you've lost your final card, even though you managed to activate your legacy, "You still won't leave this place alive," the leading infant dragon said as it looked down at Shifeng, a hint of ridicule glinting in its golden pupils. It was in no hurry to attack him at all. "Sure enough, it is still too much for me." Shifeng did not try to refute the infant dragon's mockery. Instead, he simply looked at the three infant dragons quietly. According to his original plan, after he had activated his legacy, he would rely on his life-saving measures to put more distance between himself and the abyss to lessen the abyss's suppression effect. He would then try to learn his legacy while escaping. However, he never thought that absorbing the legacy fragment would take up so long that, by the time he finished absorbing the fragment's legacy power, he would have used up all his berserk skills and life-saving skills already. In fact, he had even pushed his concentration to its very limits. It wouldn't be strange if he simply collapsed and lost consciousness right now. Meanwhile, even though he succeeded in activating his Tier 4 legacy, in his current state, trying to learn his Tier 4 legacy while going up against the three infant black dragons' attacks was simply a fantasy. Although there were differences in complexity between the Tier 4 legacies found in God's domain, normally, the more powerful a legacy was, the more difficult it would be to learn it. While he did not know how complex the Blade Saint's Tier 4 legacy was, it shouldn't be easy. Going by his past experiences, players would have only one short hour to learn their Tier 4 legacy after activating it. So long as they could learn one of the several topics offered, they would acquire their Tier 4 legacy and complete their Tier 4 promotion quest. In the past, Shifeng had never once managed to learn a topic from his Tier 4 legacy within 1 hour. As for the experts that reached Tier 4, the majority of them had just barely managed to finish learning one topic within 1 hour. And even the record holder for the fastest person to learn a topic from their Tier 4 legacy had spent nearly half an hour to do so. In his current situation, where he had to fight three infant black dragons in a high-gravity environment, just how was he supposed to learn a topic from his Tier 4 legacy within half an hour? As Shifeng was smiling bitterly, the sound of a notification entered his ears. "System, you have activated your Tier 4 legacy. You have unlocked all 4 learning topics of your legacy. You have 1 hour to learn them. So long as you learn just one topic listed below, you will be promoted to Tier 4. Formless Blade, Action Type, requires, Sword Peak Tier 4 legacy skill when activated, attacks any target within a 300-yard radius 13 times. Every attack carries 180% strength and causes 240% darkness damage. Cooldown, 15 seconds learning condition, achieve 75% skill completion rate, Magic Light Assault, Action Type, requires, Sword Peak Tier 4 legacy skill when activated, user will transform into the image of a sword that attacks a target within a 500-yard radius. When transformed, movement speed is increased by 300%, strength, by 100%, and agility, by 100%. Cooldown, 18 seconds learning condition, achieve 78% skill completion rate, Blade Guard, Action Type, requires, Sword Apex Tier 4 legacy skill draw upon the power of a sword to create a formless wall that absorbs 100% physical damage from one attack. Duration, 3 seconds cooldown, 21 seconds learning condition, achieve 80% skill completion rate, Blade Domain, Domain Type, requires, Sword Apex Tier 4 legacy skill inject one's own mana into a sword to create a blade domain that covers a 500-yard radius. While Blade Domain is active, user may control up to 7 magic swords, each carrying 180% strength and causing 300% divine damage. Duration, 5 minutes cooldown, 1 hour learning condition, achieve 85% skill completion rate. 4 legacy skills at peak rank and above. Moreover, there is even the extremely rare Apex Domain skill. Is this the effect of a 102% completion rate? Shifeng could not help doubting his eyes when he saw the content of the system notifications. In God's domain, even for peak legacies, one would be fortunate to see even one peak legacy skill during the Tier 4 promotion quest. In fact, players that activated their Tier 4 legacy at 100% completion rate would only have a chance to learn 2 peak legacy skills. As for Apex legacy skills, there was only a certain chance for them to appear for peak legacy holders. For most players, though, Apex legacy skills were akin to myths. After all, Just learning one peak Tier 4 legacy skill would grant Tier 4 players the strength to go up against superior mythic ranked monsters of the same level. Unlike ordinary Tier 3 skills and Tier 3 legacy skills, which relied on mana for activation, Tier 4 legacy skills could also use legacy power. By using legacy power to activate a Tier 4 legacy skill, players could continue infusing mana into their skill past the minimum requirement in order to raise the power of their legacy skill. And once a peak Tier 4 legacy skill reached its maximum power, a Tier 4 player fully geared in epic weapons and equipment could use it to stand toe-to-toe against superior mythic ranked monsters of the same level. It was also due to the existence of peak Tier 4 legacy skills that many peak experts had chosen not to complete their Tier 4 promotion quests despite having the ability to do so. For the majority of Tier 3 experts, though, just reaching Tier 4 was already a dream. What more trying to learn a peak Tier 4 legacy skill? Now, however, not only did Shifeng have 2 peak Tier 4 legacy skills to choose from, but he even had 2 apex Tier 4 legacy skills. However, Shifeng's expression quickly darkened slightly. In the past, out of all the advanced Tier 4 legacy skills he was offered during his promotion quests, even the most powerful one only required him to execute the skill at a 70% completion rate to learn it. Now, even the easiest peak legacy skill he was offered required him to achieve a 75% completion rate, whereas the most difficult, Blade Domain, required an 85% skill completion rate. That was basically asking him to unleash 100% of Blade Domain's power. Normally, when using Tier 4 skills and spells, Tier 4 experts would only be able to achieve a 70% completion rate or so. Even Tier 4 peak experts would be able to activate a Tier 4 skill or spell at 85% completion rate only after long training. After all, the complexity of Tier 4 skills and spells was much greater than that of Tier 3 skills and spells. Now, however, he was given only 1 hour to learn at least one peak legacy skill to such a high standard. This was simply impossible. During the time Shifeng was silently cursing the learning requirements, the 3 infant black dragons hovering in midair swooped down at him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Die, Human. The 3 infant dragons appeared almost simultaneously around Shifeng and sent their claws smashing at him, their claws forming a perfect encirclement that left no room for evasion. Screw it. It's all or nothing. Since there was no way for him to dodge the incoming claws, Shifeng gritted his teeth and chose to learn the most difficult of the 4 legacy skills offered. Blade Domain. Chapter 2693, Blade Domain's Might. Chapter 2693, Blade Domain's Might. Just as the 3 dragon claws were about to hit Shifeng, paragraphs of texts and numerous images suddenly filled his mind. These texts and images were none other than the introduction to Blade Domain. Right after these texts and images appeared, an invisible ripple from the abyssal blade spread up to 500 yards into the surroundings in the blink of an eye. Boom! 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 A moment after the ripple appeared, a frightening shockwave rocked the cave Shifeng stood in. It was so powerful that even a large boulder the size of a human adult went flying out of the cave and plunging into the bottomless abyss. When the 3 infant black dragons hovering above Shifeng saw this, their eyes widened in shock as they stared at the human, who was clearly near death's door. So, this is an apex Tier 4 legacy domain? Shifeng was astonished as he looked at the 3 massive claws that had stopped just 1 yard away from him. Currently, each of the 3 dragon claws was blocked by a 4-meter-long magic sword, unable to proceed even an inch further. System: Blade Domain activated successfully. Skill completion rate: 65%. Learning condition not met. You may use Blade Domain again in 30 seconds. 65%. It seems I made the right bet. Shifeng breathed out a sigh of relief when he saw the system notification. Truthfully, he was not confident of learning a Tier 4 skill. After all, he had never learned one before, let alone peak and apex Tier 4 legacy skills. He had been fortunate to activate the Tier 4 skill successfully on his first try. In the past, when he was learning the advanced Tier 4 legacy skills of his class, it took him over 10 minutes just to activate the skills once successfully. And although he was now a domain realm expert, he still was not confident of successfully learning peak or apex Tier 4 legacy skills within an hour. Meanwhile, in order to resolve his current predicament, he couldn't rely on a skill that provided only offensive or defensive capabilities. A skill that increased his movement speed temporarily also wouldn't do him much good. If he wished to survive, his only option was to learn a domain skill, which could be used for both offense and defense. Moreover, a domain skill was very useful for group combat. Aside from that, he had taken the initiative to learn Blade Domain, which should have been the most difficult skill to learn out of the 4 available options, because he had a big advantage to rely on: his affinity for mana. Previously, his affinity for mana was subpar at best. His control over mana wasn't particularly good, either. However, after having his soul strengthened by a soul array, his affinity for and control over mana had risen to whole new heights. Due to this reason, he had chosen to learn Blade Domain. Given the current circumstances, it would seem that he had made the right decision. He had not only succeeded in activating Blade Domain on his first attempt, but even achieved a 65% completion rate. He could also sense that he still had plenty of room for improvement. According to his past experiences in learning skills, if he could successfully activate a skill at 65% completion rate on his first try, then he should be able to raise his skill completion rate to 80% or beyond within the next hour. Human, don't celebrate yet. Although a Tier 4 domain skill is indeed powerful, without a Tier 4 body, you won't be able to exhibit its true power at all, the leading infant black dragon sneered when it saw Shifeng sighing in relief. After saying so, the infant dragon swept its tail at Shifeng and shattered the magic sword that had managed to stop its claw attack earlier. When the 2 other infant dragons saw this scene, they promptly copied their leader's actions, executing a tail swipe. This situation forced Shifeng to reconstruct the magic swords frantically to defend against these tail swipes. For a time, magic swords continuously formed and shattered around Shifeng. However, as forming magic swords required the use of mana, after 20 seconds of this process, Shifeng had already lost 10% of his mana. At this rate, he would run out of mana in just 3 more minutes and would no longer be able to sustain Blade Domain. Human, die. So long as we are here, you humans will never lay your hands on the ancient legacy here, the leading infant black dragon bellowed as it looked at Shifeng's pale complexion. At this time, controlling his mana started to feel somewhat taxing. When trying to mold mana into a specific form, one would have an easier time doing so with abundant mana. In other words, as Shifeng's mana decreased, the difficulty of molding his mana into magic swords would conversely increase. He estimated that if his mana were to fall below the 30% threshold, Blade Domain would most likely be unsustainable. Die. When the infant black dragons saw that Shifeng had already lost 20% of his mana, they simultaneously executed a Tier 3 draconic skill, Darkness Smash, with their tails. Combined with their strength, the power this skill could exhibit easily reached the intermediate Tier 4 standard. It simply wasn't an attack the magic swords could hope to stop. Don't even think of killing me so easily. After seeing that 30 seconds had gone by already, Shifeng activated Blade Domain once more. This time, he was much more careful when activating Blade Domain. He utilized only the minimum amount of mana to draw the required magic array on the abyssal blade. Boom! In the next moment, a crater formed in the ground before Shifeng. At the same time, an astonished look appeared on the infant dragons' faces. Shifeng had blocked their attacks again. How did he improve so quickly? When the infant black dragons saw the magic swords that had formed before them, they could not help eyeing Shifeng warily. System: Blade Domain activated successfully. Skill completion rate, 75%. Learning condition not met. You may use Blade Domain again in 30 seconds. What the infant dragons did not know was that, when they were forcing Shifeng to create more magic swords and deplete his mana, they had also been helping him familiarize himself with the process of creating Blade Domain's magic swords. As a result, he became increasingly adept at manipulating the domain skill's mana, hence, he succeeded in activating the skill a second time with much greater efficiency. So, that's the case. The activation of Tier 4 skills and spells is no longer dependent on just the technique of players. Instead, it requires the integration of mana control and technique. It's no wonder I had such a difficult time learning Tier 4 legacy skills in the past. When Shifeng saw the power of his blade domain increase by a significant margin, realization immediately dawned upon him. After thinking up to this point, he started using even less mana to conjure the magic swords, thereby reducing the volatility of his mana and improving its finesse. Following which, time elapsed. Every time Shifeng activated blade domain, he managed to improve its completion rate slightly. 77%. 79%. 81%. As blade domain kept strengthening, the 3 infant black dragons grew increasingly dispirited. Initially, they were overwhelming Shifeng. Eventually, they ended up fighting on par with him. Now, he actually held the upper hand in battle, relying on 6 magic swords to suppress them and reduce the number of attacks they could execute. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. After 50 minutes or so had passed. System. Blade domain activated successfully. Skill completion rate, 85%. Learning condition met. Do you wish to be promoted into a Tier 4, Blade Saint and utilize blade domain as the core for your mana body? Promote. Chapter 2694, Sword Emperor at last. Chapter 2694, Sword Emperor at last. As soon as Shifeng chose to proceed with his promotion, he felt as if a hidden door in his mana body had opened, and beyond the door was a mana treasury. Not only did the opening of this door increase the total amount of mana he wielded by a significant margin, but even the excess mana his body radiated had undergone a qualitative transformation. If the mana he radiated before was in a gaseous state, then the mana he radiated now would be in a liquid state. The density and purity of his mana were on a completely different level than before. Moreover, as the dense mana inside this treasury spread throughout his body, Shifeng's waning consciousness perked up considerably. He could conjure up 6 magic swords with little to no effort. And the mana constituting these magic swords was so dense that the swords looked and felt as if they were solid metal. In the next moment, Shifeng sent a magic sword stabbing at the leading infant black dragon. The sword crossed the distance of 10 yards instantly and caught the infant dragon completely off guard. The magic sword pierced the infant dragon's tough scales and left a deep gash on its body, the injury causing the infant dragon to shriek in pain. As for the 2 other infant dragons, although Shifeng had also sent magic swords stabbing at them, as the 2 of them were farther away, they were able to react to his attack in time, defending themselves with their claws. Even so, when their claws clashed with the magic swords, both infant dragons got knocked back by over a dozen yards, the impact causing their claws to tremble. At a glance, it was obvious that the strengths of the 2 sides were no longer on the same level. Is this the true strength of a Tier 4 class? Shifeng was surprised and excited when he saw the magic swords successfully injuring and repelling the infant black dragons. System. Congratulations. You have become a Tier 4, Blade Saint, Sword Emperor. You have activated the Apex Legacy Core. All basic attributes plus 2000, all resistances plus 150, mana recovery rate increased by 100%, all basic attributes increased by 100%, and physique increased by 150%. All physical and magical attacks below Tier 4 received will be weakened by 30%. Rewarding 100 legacy skill points. Just in terms of basic attributes, he had already reached a realm that Tier 3 players could only look at in despair, let alone the boost to his physique. If a Tier 3 player did not possess a set of extraordinary weapons and equipment, they would merely be cannon fodder in front of a Tier 4 player. Besides, there was the astonishing transformation in the quality of his mana. He was like an entirely different creature compared to when he was still at Tier 3. In God's domain, mana was the foundation of all life. Without mana, there would basically be no life. From fighting the infant black dragons, Shifeng understood just how much a player's mana would affect the potency of their skills and spells. Now that his mana was practically liquid, even if he had the same basic attributes, combat standards, and physique as a Tier 3 player, the said Tier 3 player still wouldn't last more than a few moves against him. After all, the power of the skills the 2 of them wielded would be on completely different levels. However, even though Shifeng had successfully repelled the 3 infant black dragons, he did not dare to idle around. He immediately manipulated his mana and formed his mana domain, then flew up and away from the bottomless abyss. He had no intention of clashing with the 3 infant dragons at all. Currently, he might have reached Tier 4 already and even gained the strength to hold his own against the 3 infant black dragons, but that was it. Killing the 3 infant dragons was still impossible for him. After all, now that he had gotten promoted to Tier 4, he could no longer spam Blade Domain like before. Once Blade Domain's duration ended, he would be forced to utilize his own body to clash with the infant dragons. With his limited stamina, he would definitely fall first before he could kill the 3 infant dragons. Now that he had already achieved his goal, he naturally had no reason to continue fighting the 3 infant black dragons. The sooner he left this dangerous place, the better. Fortunately, so long as players reached Tier 4 in God's Domain and managed to form the passive-type mana domain, they could fly using their own mana, no longer reliant on external items to do so. Despicable human, don't even think of leaving. The 3 infant black dragons saw through Shifeng's thoughts. They widened their mouths and blew dragon breath at him without hesitation. In the next moment, the 3 dark beams the 3 infant dragons released merged into one and rapidly extended toward Shifeng, the resultant beam turning everything in its path into an empty void. The AoE of the beam made escaping its range in time impossible. Come. However, despite the combined dark beam's approach, Shifeng showed no sign of fear at all. On the contrary, a hint of excitement and anticipation gleamed in his eyes. He had just been promoted to Sword Emperor and was still unfamiliar with his new strength. When he was controlling Blade Domain's magic swords, he had merely executed the most basic forms of attack using them. He was extremely eager to see just how strong he was, now that he had risen to Tier 4. Meanwhile, the 3 infant dragons' combined dragon breath was undoubtedly the perfect target for testing his strength. In the next moment, Shifeng started executing his defensive combat technique, Sword's Orbit, using the 6 magic swords he had conjured, creating a defensive sphere that covered a 30-yard radius around him. Boom! When the massive beam of light came into contact with the beautiful galaxy of stars around Shifeng, space around them suddenly transformed into an empty void, as if Armageddon had just arrived. If other players were to see this scene, they would definitely be dumbfounded. While looking at the empty void that had formed above them, the 3 infant black dragons revealed a smirk on their faces. The combination attack they had just executed was far stronger than a single dragon breath. It was also the strongest move the 3 of them possessed. Although Shifeng had already been promoted to Tier 4, if he received the attack without using an invulnerability skill, he would still sustain heavy injuries. However, when the empty void started recovering to its original state, the smirks on the infant dragons' faces disappeared, replaced with a look of shock. After all, at this moment, let alone Shifeng suffering injuries, even his equipment wasn't scratched. It was as if their combination attack was nothing but a light breeze to him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Even an advanced combat technique has been strengthened to such an extent. Shifeng was astonished as he looked at the empty void around him. Although he had known that Sword's Orbit was up to defending against the 3 infant black dragons' combined dragon breath, as he now possessed much greater basic attributes, he never thought that he could stop their attacks so easily. Earlier, he had clearly used Sword's Orbit just like normal, yet it was as if the technique had transformed into a magic array. The moment he executed Sword's Orbit, the ambient mana had actually gathered around him and strengthened the power of his technique, to the point where it was equivalent to a Tier 4 defensive skill. Given Sword's Orbit's performance, Shifeng suddenly felt that, if not for Blade Domain's limited duration, he might really have a chance of killing one of the 3 infant black dragons. Meanwhile, seeing that Blade Domain's duration was about to run out, Shifeng hurriedly controlled his mana and flew to the space-time vortex in the sky above the bottomless abyss and disappeared from the Legacy Land, leaving behind 3 dumbfounded infant black dragons. Chapter 2695, Sudden Change in God's Domain. Chapter 2695, Sudden Change in God's Domain. Exodus Tales v2. Chapter 1, Sudden Change in God's Domain. Damn it. That heaven-blessed bastard got away. We're doomed. What should we do? How do we explain this to that great personage? Anger and panic filled the eyes of the 3 infant black dragons as they watched Shifeng leave the bottomless abyss through the space-time vortex. A sense of helplessness also suffused their trembling voices when they spoke. Our original plan is already ruined, now that the legacy has been stolen. That great personage will definitely not spare us, once he finds out. At this point, all we can do is scatter and flee. Otherwise, none of us will survive. That's our only option now. Hopefully, that great personage will focus his anger on that heaven-blessed bastard so that our chances of survival will be a little better. After the leading infant dragon spoke up, the three quickly reached a consensus. They then flapped their black wings, their hearts brimming with anger at Shifeng as they fled the bottomless abyss. Simultaneously, they also gloated over the misfortune awaiting him. Meanwhile, on the other side of the space-time vortex, Shifeng was wholly unaware of the discussion that had just taken place among the infant black dragons. After experiencing a momentary blackout, like before, he found himself back inside the secret room of Zero Wing's residence in Silverwing City. I did it. Tier 4. I became a real Tier 4. An indescribable sense of joy and excitement welled up within Shifeng as he observed the liquid mana surging toward his body from all around. The dense mana continuously replenished his body's depleted mana and mended his haggard spirit. He had finally accomplished the goal that had eluded him in his previous life. Moreover, he had even reached Tier 4 with the hidden class Blade Saint. In terms of basic attributes and skills, what the Blade Saint class offered was leaps and bounds stronger than ordinary Tier 4 classes. Now, he was a true powerhouse in God's domain, and even the various NPC kingdoms would have to respect him. As Shifeng reveled in his success, the system's cold, monotonous voice suddenly entered his ears. System announcement: God's domain will undergo a major update. Simultaneously, the new expansion pack Heroes Return will be activated. All players will be logged out in 30 minutes. The update's estimated duration is 1 natural day. The system announcement appeared 3 times consecutively. Inevitably, everyone in God's domain was shocked. Shifeng was no exception. A major update? How is this possible? Shifeng looked at the system announcement displayed before him in confusion. Even after he reread it several times, incomprehension and doubt still filled his eyes. There were plenty of system updates in God's domain. However, even in his previous life, the game had undergone only 2 major updates throughout his 10 years of gaming. The first major update occurred 3 years after God's domain's official launch. There had already been plenty of Tier 4 players in the game at that time, and Tier 3 players were everywhere. Some players had even started attempting their Tier 5 promotions. Yet, now, how long had it been since God's domain launched? God's domain's first major update was also the most memorable event for Shifeng. The update had shaken the entire world, transforming God's domain into the world's only game and entertainment. After the first major update, God's domain had become a completely different world from before, no longer the virtual reality game everyone thought it was. God's domain had become an existence beyond everyone's imagination. Players were no longer players but a group of special entities in God's domain. Be it God's domain's NPCs or monsters, both had existed as real people after the update, with their own lives and personalities. They had existed for the sake of survival. These changes had made God's domain a completely different world, no longer just a virtual reality game, but an existence that could instead affect the real world. At this moment, Shifeng wasn't the only person puzzled by the sudden arrival of this major update. Many players and the upper echelons of major powers were similarly surprised and confused by this situation. A major update? And it's even going to take 1 natural day? What is going on? Crap. I haven't even reached Tier 3, yet the system's going through an upgrade? Is the system trying to take my life? For a while, players in God's domain voiced their complaints about an exasperation over the sudden system update. The update duration of 1 natural day caught everyone off guard, and they didn't know what to do with this unexpected free time. After all, at this point, God's domain had long since become a part of their lives. Logging into God's domain every day had already become an instinct. The previous system updates had lasted only a few to a dozen real-world hours. This 24-hour system update was simply maddening. Anyone who entered God's domain as part of the first batch of players knew that the difficulty of leveling up and killing monsters would increase substantially after a system update. The requirements for players' techniques would also increase. Hence, the major update would undoubtedly be a nightmare for players who had yet to reach Tier 3. The arrival of this update would also bring a massive change for the various powers in God's domain. After all, this update would reduce the number of players capable of reaching Tier 3. The difficulty and resources required to nurture their guild's internal experts would also increase. This, in turn, would cripple their current development plans, and they would have to restart their planning from scratch. However, while some powers felt dissatisfied and angry over this major update, others were overjoyed, especially the new powers and corporations that had joined the game just recently. The increase in the difficulty of leveling up and obtaining resources would undoubtedly destabilize the status quo in God's domain. If the newcomers properly grasped this opportunity, they could replace God's domain's veteran powers. The atmosphere among God's domain's various powers became extraordinarily tense. While frantically poaching talents and purchasing resources, many of these powers also drastically reduced the resources for ordinary and low-potential members. In turn, this prompted many guild players to leave their respective guilds for greener pastures. While God's domain's various powers were taking action, Liang Jing hurriedly contacted Shifeng. Guild leader, all major powers are currently purchasing coins and resources on a large scale. Shall we start buying as well? Liang Jing asked anxiously. That won't be necessary. Shifeng couldn't help chuckling when he heard Liang Jing's words. Haven't those superpowers been constantly preventing us from acquiring funds? We'll now dispose of all the coins we earned through Silverwing City during this period. Let them buy as much as they want. Guild leader. Shifeng's words took Liang Jing aback, her mind unable to comprehend his intentions. The various powers were currently doing all they could to purchase coins and resources, yet Shifeng wanted to sell Zero Wings coins in bulk. Once the system update ended, Zero Wing would end up in a pinch. Just do it. Shifeng smiled but didn't offer any additional explanation. According to past system updates, purchasing coins and resources in bulk was indeed the correct move. However, the system update this time would be different from previous ones. After the major update, not only would resources not be scarce, but obtaining them would become easier instead. Even leveling up would become less taxing. However, the major update wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, either. After the major update, whether external or internal, the requirements for players' promotion would become more stringent. Notably, the changes made toward mana would require a greater understanding and control of mana to manipulate it properly. Hence, all peak experts in his previous life had also been master magicians. Right. Once everyone goes offline, have Melancholic and the others meet me in the conference room. I have something to discuss with them, Shifeng said. He hadn't gained only a newfound understanding of mana during his Tier 4 promotion quest, but also a strange metal that repelled mana. This was his first time seeing such a metal. So long as this item wasn't damaged beyond repair, they could refine it into a weapon or equipment. The mana repulsion effect was beneficial to players. After all, mana was everything in God's domain. There would be no life without mana. Naturally, monsters couldn't survive without mana. If he could successfully recast the metal, he would have the capital to contend against the various superpowers. Such an item would be helpful when he explored dangerous forbidden lands to acquire resources necessary for conquering the Tier 4 promotion quest. In God's domain, high-level forbidden lands contained most of the resources capable of helping players reach Tier 4. Although Shifeng had already reached Tier 4, if he visited these places by himself, the best he could do was survive. He wouldn't be able to conduct a proper exploration of these locations. During his previous life, the various superpowers typically sent teams of Tier 4 players to explore these places. Going alone would be suicide. Okay. I'll contact them now. Liang Jing then disconnected the call. Frozen World, Frost Heaven City, Frost Heaven's headquarters. Due to God's domain's sudden system update, Frost Heaven had also hurriedly convened a meeting to discuss the changes that would occur to the game. Currently, over a dozen people sat in the magnificent conference room. Every one of these people was an existence capable of shaking the real world with their every step. At this moment, however, these people had nervous expressions as they looked at the middle-aged man seated at the front of the room. This middle-aged man looked very amiable. Although he had an unyielding appearance, the aura he gave off felt like a spring breeze. However, none of the people present could relax in his presence. "That's it for the meeting," the middle-aged man said, adjourning the meeting. He then shifted his gaze to Mushin and the petite girl beside her, saying, "Mushin, Kurue, both of you stay behind." "Yes, sir." As if they had received an amnesty, everyone unrelated promptly rushed off, leaving the middle-aged man, Mushin, and the petite Kurue sitting quietly inside the large conference room. "Uncle Hong, do you have good news to share?" Mushin asked fawningly as she looked at the stern, middle-aged man. "Little girl, you're still pretending? Do you honestly think you can hide the fact that you've invited Zero Wing from everyone?" Nonchalantly, the middle-aged man added, "You should know how rare this opportunity is. This will be a gathering of titans. Even those so-called superpowers can only dream of joining. This is also an opportunity for Frost Heaven to become a true titan, yet you invited some unknown outsiders to participate." Upon hearing this, Mushin automatically turned to Kurue beside her. In response, Kurue stuck out her tongue playfully and smiled, expressing, "So what if I told on you?" Mushin sighed and shook her head in helplessness toward this little sister of hers. "Uncle Hong, while they are indeed outsiders, you shouldn't underestimate their strength, either. This goes especially for Black Flame," Mushin said unhurriedly. "How strong can he be? He's merely a peerless expert in the eyes of ordinary people." The middle-aged man referred to as Uncle Hong shook his head. "You should know what kind of people we are dealing with. Those people are the truly talented, possessing frightening potential and special bloodlines. They even have the full support of those major corporations. The peak experts on the Secret Pavilion's experts list and the various superpowers peerless experts are but the tip of the iceberg. Uncle Hong is right. Being just stronger than average is nothing to those people," Kurue said as she nodded with a smile. "However, Black Flame is really strong. He can single-handedly contend against Tier 4, Faux-Saint Devourers. Although he can't be a part of the main force this time, he can still provide support from the sidelines," Mushin explained. "He can hold his ground against a Devourer?" Uncle Hong was slightly surprised by this information. "It seems this person is indeed strong. HMPH. What's so amazing about contending against a Devourer using brute force? Plenty of my subordinates can, too," Kurue said disapprovingly. Upon hearing Kurue's words, Mushin had to resist the urge to pinch the girl's cheeks. She just explained, "Uncle Hong, that person has a mana domain, as well. He will be of significant help with our plans." "He has a mana domain." This revelation piqued Uncle Hong's interest. "This will indeed be of help to us. However, I'm afraid these things still aren't enough. You should know, as well, that an individual's strength is very limited in this upcoming operation. Moreover, the location we're visiting this time is extraordinary. So, I will have to personally inspect whether Zero Wing's members can join this operation." "You'll inspect in person?" Mushin exclaimed in surprise. Uncle Hong's identity was preeminent. The guild leaders of super guilds and even those at the helm of major corporations had to treat him with respect. If he visited Zero Wing's headquarters and news of it got out, it would cause a sensation among the various major corporations. "Of course." In a severe tone, Uncle Hong said, "The operation this time is of utmost importance. We cannot afford carelessness. But the time is almost up. This system update is also going to take one whole day. We'll be tight for time if we proceed with the inspection," Mushin objected. "Don't worry. We'll just pay Zero Wing's headquarters a short visit. It won't take much time," Uncle Hong said, smiling. "Since you've made up your mind, leave Zero Wing's inspection to me, Uncle Hong," Kurue suddenly suggested. "Zero Wing is a local tyrant. If they join in the operation this time, they will behave arrogantly. Also, seeing how much Big Sis admires that person's strength, I'm thinking of bringing Tian Cheng of Frost Heaven's 10 Swords along." 1. We can test whether Black Flame is as strong as Big Sis says. 2. We can show Zero Wing that not just anybody can join Frost Heaven's secret operation. Even if Zero Wing passes the inspection, they'll know how to behave during the operation. Mushin fell speechless upon hearing her little sister's words. The 10 swords were geniuses the Boulder Corporation had nurtured using all their technology and resources. Every one of them was a monster among monsters. They were also among the core combatants for the upcoming operation. It would be overkill to test Zero Wing using one of the 10 swords. Mushin, what do you think? Uncle Hong asked. I don't have any objections. Mushin agreed after giving the matter some thought. In her opinion, Shifeng shouldn't have any problems going up against Tian Cheng with his strength. Good. Then if Zero Wing's strength is no good, you'll have to modify your agreement with them, Uncle Hong said, nodding. I understand. Mushin nodded obediently. Although she was the Boulder Corporation's heir, she couldn't go against her Uncle Hong's decisions. Big Sis, I have great expectations for you. Karue revealed a cute smile before logging off. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Hopefully, his performance won't disappoint Uncle Hong too much, Mushin prayed inwardly after seeing Karue leave. She had incurred a considerable expenditure to invite Zero Wing this time. If she annulled their contract, she would have to provide a lot of compensation. Meanwhile, in the top-floor conference room of Zero Wing's headquarters, Shifeng, who had just logged off, was sorting through the unknown metals information when he heard a knock on the door. Subsequently, the door to the conference room opened slowly, and a clear and pleasant voice came from outside. Guild leader, they're here. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.